we're going to go into
Short one.
Oh, okay. All
On
right.
the fleet.
The fleet asset
Well,
management.
that's right. We haven't done the work session. Well, session on Monday, November 10th. We are all here at the dais. We only have one item on the work session this evening, and that's 3.1, and it is an item on the agenda to an overview of the 10-year general fund vehicle replacement plan and funding for the program. Mark Flynn, 2% from Municipal Services Manager.
We agree. Let's just get on with it.
I know.
I think that's
You know,
the right
they
way to
tell
go.
me these things, and I have a script, but I still, you know me, I go off.
Mayor, members
we're
of
here.
council, thank you very much for the opportunity to visit with you here this evening. I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Charles Schneider, the fleet superintendent. Charles is coming up on his second-year anniversary, and he'll help facilitate some of the presentation this evening. Asset management from the fleet perspective, this is the second in the series of presentations that staff will make to you over the next couple of months that relate to asset management as a whole. You may recall pavement management was the first one that came before you a few months ago, earlier in calendar 14. Fleet this evening, and I think some follow-up will still occur with some issues related to ITS and still some information with regard to parks and parks equipment. The information this evening from an asset management standpoint, our desire is to show you how we're moving forward with the information related to long-term planning, and then to demonstrate that we're actually looking at a sound financial plan about how to move forward with that. We're going to talk briefly about some slides we've presented. There was quite a bit of information presented to you in the slides, but we listened to what you all shared with us with regard to the retreat over the course of the weekend. So hopefully we'll throw those out and you can take a look at those with information. We're happy to answer any questions that you have, questions that may arise about the presentation, and a little summary toward the end. But we appreciate the opportunity this evening. I'm going to introduce Charles Schneider.
Good evening, Charles. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I don't know if I'll be as eloquent as Mr. Flynn, but I'll try. We have two major partners during the fleet replacement process: the finance department and the department in which we're replacing the vehicle with. We partner with the finance department in order to ensure that we have adequate funding for the recommended fleet replacement plan and ensure that we adhere to the procurement policies set forth. We also partner with the owning department that we're going to replace the vehicle with to ensure that we meet their mission requirements. An example is this year I sat down with the department who had a utility truck that was scheduled for replacement. And during the dialogue, they said, "Hey, Charles, we don't need a truck. We need a sedan." During that process, we ended up saving about $8,000, but the difference between a truck and a sedan. The cost per mile, operating costs are much lower on a sedan. So that's just kind of an example of our partnership. The next couple slides are going to be why we do fleet replacement. We take in a combination of factors of life to date, age of the vehicle, and the cost to operate the vehicle. Here are the impacts if we do not do fleet replacement. The operating costs are going to go up. Emergency repairs will go up as well. And the inability for our department to be, our staff to be in their assigned vehicles will decrease. Here are some of the risks associated with deferring replacements. As you know, the older your vehicle gets, the more miles you get on it, it becomes less reliable and less dependable. Some of the risks that we may encounter. When we bring a new vehicle into our fleet, when we purchase that new vehicle, we assign it a life cycle, meaning it's going to stay in the system or eligible for fleet replacement for a period of time. We assign that life cycle based on industry standards. And what we did over the last couple months is we analyzed those industry standards to validate them. And what we found out is that there are certain classes of vehicles that we could extend the life cycle on, such as a general government sedan. The life cycle is 10 years. Through our analysis, we were able to extend that to 11.5 years. the plan must remain flexible. If we encounter a major accident or major mechanical failure, such as an engine or a transmission that fails, we've got to be able to move vehicles in and out of the plan based on the costs associated with that unpredicted either mechanical failure or accident. So there needs to be a little bit of flexibility. In collaboration with the finance department, here is the next 10-year costs and estimated averages for fleet replacement. We're going to average about $1.6 million over the next 10 years.
Thank you.
When you think about asset management, the part that Charles has just discussed is pretty much the program, how we administer the program, how we're identifying the vehicles that we're going to choose for replacement. You've got a copy of the 10-year plan. I think it was provided with you as part of the COAC. But now we're kind of shifting into the idea of asset management. What's the long-term planning, both from a responsible perspective of assuring that the vehicles are adequately maintained, but also we're financially prepared to be able to deal with that. When you look at the slide that's presented before you, the number of vehicles being replaced represents the left axis. Across the bottom are the 10 years for the plan, the fiscal year for that 10-year horizon, and then the dollar cost is expressed on the right-hand side of that axis. When you look at that plan, we're a little bit all over the place. We're a little bit high in a couple of years. We're a little bit low in the other. The blue bar that you see represents what those
Especially
costs.
2017.
Fiscal 17 is a big concern for us. So the idea of asset management comes into play for the types of professional management that we're putting into the equation. When those vehicles are coming in for service, we're evaluating, we're prioritizing what those replacement components would be. Is it possible for us to look at extending a vehicle for a year or two? The high dollar cost that you see in fiscal 17 is tied with the projected replacement of an additional piece, 3 pieces of fire apparatus. Obviously, a very high unit cost per individual unit when you have 3 of those coming in one specific year based upon how they were purchased. It's a significant amount of money for us to be able to, to be able to tackle at any given point in time. So from our perspective, when we're analyzing the types of maintenance that's being done, the types of wear and tear that we're seeing on the unit, our hope is that we might be able to bring one of those units forward or perhaps one of those units later in that fiscal year planning cycle so that we can get that dollar expenditure back to a more average annual value at about that $1.67 million that we're able to show in that previous slide with just the raw average.
I did know you had some pretty old ones, a 99 Trail Boss, a 98 Chevy cargo van, the Caterpillar is 97, Generator's 97. So you have
we have a number of
oldies in there.
We do, and oldies, but not necessarily ready yet to be thrown out with the bathwater. The maintenance that we look at, the way we're looking at those components, we want to analyze what's the life left in the unit when it comes in for service. We're doing an analysis. We're looking at what we've spent to date on the vehicle. We're looking at the types of maintenance that are required and whether or not it's a good expenditure. We don't want to throw good money after bad, but we want to make sure that the units, be them generators or other pieces of equipment or vehicles, are available for the express mission that the vehicle is intended to provide. We also are still a little bit in the catch-up mode for the number of years where we didn't perform any replacement. There were 3 or 4 years in the cycle since my arrival at the city where we didn't actually facilitate any replacement. So we are still catching up on some of those pieces. But I think what we've put together is a very comprehensive plan that's been well thought out both fiscally as well as from an operational standpoint for the divisions that are going to make use of those pieces of equipment.
Mayor, we both have questions.
I'm going to go Vice Mayor first.
It's my understanding this is your first part. We've had this discussion. You're working with other departments to come up with a replacement schedule for parks equipment, other rolling stock. You have IT equipment. You have servers, stuff here at City Hall, desks, etc. You got a variety of things that depreciate, have a life expectancy greater than a year. That's going to be part of your overall asset management. Is that a valid statement?
It is, sir. The component that we're focused on this evening for this presentation was specifically focused at general government vehicles, general government funded vehicles. But the pavement management component that was presented previously, I believe IT and parks equipment, the items in the parks that may be more associated with like the swing sets and those types of pieces. The rolling stock within the Parks and Recreation Department, that is addressed within the plan for the components that are managed by the fleet group. The things that we're still working with them on, though, would be like the lawnmowers and the yard tractors. In addition to that, we performed a similar analysis for the folks in enterprise, for the enterprise funds, water, wastewater, sanitation, so we could provide that information to them to aid in their planning as well.
I don't know if Bob wants to,
Let's
Bob
stop
wants to
here, and
say
I
something
think
there.
Bob, our deputy city manager wants to add to that.
Yes, this is, as Mark said, this is the second in really a few different presentations for Yellow Papers, depending on how this works out. We have looked at IT. We weren't quite ready to prepare the IT presentation, but that too, both in terms of the servers, all the equipment, and also the software and the licenses. We're trying to bundle it all together. It's a little cumbersome with us being in transition right now, but we're going to be completing that before the budget. Secondly, the parks, both the inventory of the parks, inventories of each park and its equipment is being analyzed right now, as well as some of the landscaping requirements that we're embarking on throughout the city. The wastewater and water will also be identified, but we're really focusing in on general funded assets at this point in time.
Yeah, I appreciate the focus on the general fund. My only concern, again, I've had a discussion offline as it relates to this, is that you encompass all, and again, I know it's all going to be driven by funds available, but, a comprehensive look, and I know more of it's coming, on the parks and the lawnmowers and a variety of other things. So we kind of got an idea what kind of money has to be set aside so we don't fall back into that mode, say, for example, during the Great Recession where we just didn't have the money to do that, so we just keep sliding more and more. I prefer the more proactive approach, if we can, and the funding's available, to put the money aside in the asset replacement so that when time comes to truly replace something, it's not fighting for ongoing money, which is your operations. So I think from a strategy standpoint, that for me is a very smart approach.
That's exactly the concept, and the main takeaway from the vehicle portion that you saw tonight is a 1.67 annual requirement. That was what we were estimating from finance. This schedule has more or less proven it out that it is a valid strategy, and we're well funded for the next 10 years.
Thank you.
Wally?
My question was, noticing that the fiscal year 17, and it shows that there's 3 fire apparatus, what else is going to be purchased, or is it just, it's that much for 3 fire apparatuses?
In that fiscal year?
Yes.
Councilman Campbell? This slide represents the breakdown of the number of units by the individual departments. The departments are listed across the bottom: police, fire, streets, parks, recreation, and then the general government vehicles, the administration vehicles. So in fiscal 17, of the 26 or 27 units that would be replaced in that year, there are a number of them, perhaps as many as 13 or 14 that are in the police department. Fire department probably has 3 or 4 of those. Parks and Rec, 4 in the fire department, I believe. Parks and Rec has some vehicles that are in there, and then the general administration, general government component are included in there as well.
Yeah, that's a better slide. That's a more telling slide for everybody. So
the units are specifically listed also in the plan attachment that was included with your COAC. We called out the individual units by number.
Well, we needed to ask a question. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I apologize.
No. I welcome the opportunity. You got to remember, I like this stuff. This is the bread and butter for me.
he's enthusiastic on this. Joanne?
Well, I think you kind of answered my question, Bob, because when I was looking at all this, I've been thinking the last at least 3 years that we've been trying to play catch-up of funding these vehicles. And so then I was looking at this as how is it relating back to the CIP that we've already been planning for with fleet replacement, and how does this mirror each other? And so I think, Bob, you kind of said that this is just really showing that we're kind of on track, is what I'm hearing. Is that correct? Okay. That's good. Thank you.
Councilman Stipp?
Mark, to kind of piggyback on Councilman Campbell, the 3 engines that we're talking about, which pushes that previous slide's bar way up. Got 2 questions on it. Number one is, and this may just be an accounting formula issue, but if we're buying 3 of the exact same trucks, why is the cost not exactly the same?
The costs were established based upon the in-service costs. When the original unit was put in place, there were a number of components that might have been used in the specific upfit of that truck. That cost is then essentially
Calculated
amortized
out.
over its life based upon the replacement cost with an inflation factor that's applied by the software system. Those are the partnership that Charles referred to, where we're actually sitting down with the departments. We did that with the last replacements of fire apparatus. We put together a very detailed specification that really got to the heart of what they needed. We're able to defer on a few things that they didn't really need to have, and then adjust those dollars accordingly.
Okay, so
that component really, I would liken that to a planning tool.
all right.
A financial planning tool.
So that's question one. Question two was, if this is causing, I'm going to say, stress on the financial picture for 17, and that stress was caused by purchasing 3 in 1 year, has there been consideration given to pushing one of those to the year previous into 16, when the dollars seem to be a little less? Have we talked about that so we don't perpetuate this cycle of buying 3 at a time?
We are doing that very thing. Yeah, exactly. When I talk about the idea of leveling, that component, the idea would be for us to look at, of those 3 units that are slated for replacement in 17, our desire is that as you're coming in for service, for preventive maintenance service, we're going to want to prioritize them, which is, quite frankly, the worst of the 3. Which one is causing us the most trouble on the system? And then our desire is to make sure that that's always the first one that we're removing.
Larry?
Oops, I'm sorry.
Let me just, if I could, because the part on the financial stress, I want to kind of follow up on what Bob had said. If you look at that chart, it goes all over, but what we're talking about is a smoothing. We want to fund the same each year, regardless of where that number is. So that number in fiscal year 17 does not alarm me at all. Today, this fiscal year, we put in $2 million as our annual appropriation. We also had $1.5 million of money from prior years. So that's smoothing over the 10-year period of time. We can deal with the ups and downs. We don't want fleet to go in and accelerate purchasing a vehicle just because the next year looks worse. We'd rather they have the right tools to replace it when it needs to be replaced.
So basically, that's your answer for the question Joe asked about he would rather money be set aside.
It is set aside, and
Okay,
it
so-
carries over, and that's all that it's used for. So that allows them to make good business decisions rather than reacting to cash.
All right, thanks.
Okay, everybody? All right.
Other questions that we can address for you?
No, I think they're just fine.
Thank you very much.
Nice briefing.
We
Thank
certainly
you.
appreciate the opportunity to visit with you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. So let's see, if there's anything else you need, Council, before we dismiss this meeting? Okay, you now only have about 7 minutes. Now I can do it right. So meeting adjourned, and we will begin right on the dot of 6. This first clock we're going by.
Okay.
All right? This one here. Meeting adjourned.